Doot. We got our tea. We are recording a few videos today, so our tea is looking a little foggy, but it's still got its essence, okay? And of course, we have Mr. Slothe here with us, here to keep the peace as we are out in these streets, just getting the comfort of our own home. Now let's get into it. Let's move our straw out the way. So today on Love After Lockup, we're talking about the first couple episodes with this round of new couples in season 3, episodes 38 and 39. I want to talk about and compare Courtney and Josh as well as Doug and Rachel in this episode. And so I see a lot of similarities between the two and a lot of politics, especially in the case of Courtney and Josh, that I really want to, dive into and laugh about, okay? So just with a quick snippet on both couples, we got Courtney and Josh over here. They met while Josh was incarcerated, and while he was incarcerated, Courtney was a corrections officer, actually a officer lieutenant. So she was in a higher ranking authority position of leadership in the prison, and Josh was a inmate there. So they were it's just a lot, you guys. And this happens. People think that this is really off the wall, but there are a lot of instances where people who are employed by the state system, particularly the state Department of Corrections, enter romantic, sexual, or otherwise intimate relationships with the incarcerated people that they are literally paid to protect and serve, okay? And it's really disgusting. But on the other hand, it is a survival move for people who are incarcerated. And the reason why I said disgusting and it really flew out of my mouth, because I don't deny that people who are on completely different ends of a spectrum can really connect and go beyond what their position is, or what their race is, or some people want to say what their age is or whatever. But in a society where there are different types of norms, there are certain ones that people feel are appropriate to disrupt or completely disrespect, and then there are others where people will always question what the hell you're doing, okay? And some of the ones where people are like, oh well, who cares? It might be their age, or of course, race. Not a lot of people get up in arms over mixed marriages, when it comes to that kind of thing, or people who are from completely different culture backgrounds, people who are in long distance relationships, people who have immigrated from far lands to be with somebody. People will eventually, or even the social norms of those things have fluctuated. But what has never fluctuated is a correction officer, a person of authority, dating someone within their reign of captivity. It's more outlandish than a teacher-student relationship, because there's no nurturing there. It's all enslavement and rules and restrictions and punishment. There's nothing really being given. That's why the protect and serve motto that we really extend to our outside police officers, that doesn't make sense either, really just melts away into oblivion when you get behind the walls of a prison, because there's no actual gain for anyone in those relationships. And so when something romantic comes of it, it's always it's always an eyebrow curler, because it's what? How? When people connect with people on the outside, there is gain, but there's so much against people who are employed by the system. And I really was on that for a while. Like, look at Slothe back there. He's holding that instant. Like, bro, I can't even hold this up for you anymore. So let's talk about Doug and Rachel. But before I go into them, I want to talk about where Josh and Courtney are. So let's light this incense. So Josh and Courtney is like, Courtney has gone through, as a result of her time spent pursuing Josh. This smells so good. I get these incense from the Native store at the 12 Oaks or Tel 12 Mall in Novi, Michigan. There is a wonderful store that is owned by a family of Native American people. I'll link their Instagram. So let's give him a new incense, Mr. Slothe. Okay? And we will, before we get into Courtney and Josh, let's get into Doug and Rachel. We're going over to get into Doug and Rachel in the second part of this video. Let's light our next incense. All right. Cheers to you all. Dude. So I talked in this first chunk of the video about Courtney and Josh and the power dynamics that resulted in their marriage. Now I'm going to talk about Doug and Rachel and the lust whirlwind that resulted in their marriage. Okay? So Doug is incarcerated, and I really need to look up where these people are incarcerated, and when we touch back on each of these couples, because I'm just going to give my initial reaction. I'm looking for a pen so I can write this down. Of course, I pick a pencil with paint on it that's not sharpened in any way, shape, or form. Here we go. Now we have a nice felt tip marker. This is a favorite to write with. We're going to look up the prisons and states that these couples are from and really key in on that. This should have been a pre-instant combo, but we'll do that in the update. Prison and state origin video. So getting back on target with Doug and Rachel. So they met while he was incarcerated, and it's a whirlwind relationship that they have because they got married while they met while he was incarcerated, got married while he was incarcerated, and then are married for 4 months before he's released from prison. And he's lived his entire adult life as a person under state supervision. And so it's really, really a huge transition for Doug to be getting out of prison, to be a husband, to be technically a homeowner, to also be a father to a son who is now in seemingly his full custody. It's an entire situation that Doug is obviously overwhelmed by, but also incredibly grateful for. And you know, they're kind of the more hopeful couple, because it's like they've got so much that has come into place for them. And of course, Doug still has probation that he's on. He can't be outside of the home between certain hours, and not at all during the weekend. And just to touch on state supervision, it's different for different states. Some states have mandatory supervision. Like in Michigan, it's 2 years flat, no matter what your crime was before. In other states, and during that time, you can vote. In other states, like Washington, it really depends on the type of crime that you had, how long your supervision is. And when I was living in Washington, it's called community supervision. And when I was there, you couldn't vote. And then by the time that I left, I was working in voting rights at the time. they extended voting rights for people who are under community supervision in Washington, which was a huge win, and they're still making a lot of strides in that area in Washington state as well. And in other states like Mississippi, when you get out of prison, your probation is like it's ongoing renewal of your lack of voting rights, and so you have to actually petition the governor to get your voting rights back after you spent time, if you've ever been convicted of a crime, if you have the former felon label, if you check that box on certain applications that are given by outdated companies, then you most likely in places like Kentucky and Mississippi would not be able to vote for the duration of your adult life. And for people who were incarcerated prior to their becoming a adult, prior to their 18th birthday, they would have never had the experience of voting. And a lot of people who, were incarcerated when they were in their 20s or their 30s, they never valued or were engaged civically, and so they never voted before either. So yeah, that's my relation to this work. And so in seeing, the different things that Doug has to navigate in his probation, it's really interesting to think about his status in being engaged in society when he has all these restrictions and these rules that are forced on him by the state. And so it's really odd also that he makes statements like he wants the American dream, like he's never had it before, and he really touches on this phenomena of he has a life of proving that he can stay out, proving to his son, proving to his mother, proving to his new wife that he can stay out of prison. And that's really the focus of his life. And it's really sad for me to watch, because there's so many people who embrace that ideology of this is the purpose of their life, just to stay out of prison, because there's so much to manage in that. Like, we all know as adults navigating society that there are so many different responsibilities that go with being a working, voting, business owning, or fully employed or even partially employed, student, mother, father, American. There's so many things that are tied as tasks to doing those things. So imagine with all of that, okay, take business owner out of it, but take fully employed or partially employed out of it, because once you get out of prison, all you really have are the relationships with the people that you've been restricted from bonding with in a genuine way for so long. And whatever provisions the state will allow. And in probation is barely anything. Like, you can barely move. So it's again just my touch on these couples. I think with Rachel and Doug, Rachel's put in a lot of effort. And the reason why she's doing that is because she was formerly in a relationship with someone who was formerly incarcerated, and they were married and they got a divorce. So I feel like she's really channeling a lot of the disappointment from that experience into motivation to do whatever it could possibly take for Doug to be the man that she's always needed, okay? That she needed in her former marriage. Not that she always needed, like she was, her whole life, you don't need a man, but in her former marriage and now in her current marriage. And so I'm happy for Rachel that she has her husband with her in her physical presence. I'm sad for the disappointments that she will inevitably encounter just being looped into this state supervision world. But I'm hopeful for the life that they'll build. And so for both Courtney and Josh and Doug and Rachel, the dynamics of their relationships are interesting, because there was a lot of sacrifice on the end of the woman. I put my hand on my heart because I know how it feels, okay? A lot of sacrifice on the hand of the woman, who, some may think has a lot to give, but no woman has a lot to give. I'll say that. And on that, I will cheers to you all. I'm gonna do another clip talking about another couple in the next video. So it'll be a completely different video, and I will talk to you guys then. You guys know I just finished a video on Deontay and Nicole. Let's set this up here while I do my next instant. I'm gonna film another video for you all, and I'm just gonna do a little pre-instant chat because for a while I've been wanting to do episode reviews on Love After Lockup, but so much happens and I can go on tangents, you all. I write for a living about issues related to prisoners' human rights and voting for people who are impacted by mass incarceration, and phone calls being free, and people in prison having more wide, diverse educational programming and more pathways for successful careers on the outside, all that stuff. And I just write about it. I have a newsletter that goes out to people who are incarcerated across 30 states in the United States. Probably 31 or 32 states now the right to vote report is in. So I'll link that in the description box. But I really wanted to review Love After Lockup because with that career expertise, there are a lot of things in the show that really just, make me laugh, trigger me, make me think about some of my readers and their stories. And this for me is a great opportunity to sort of tie those two worlds together. Like, I'm very entertained by Love After Lockup and Life After Lockup, and I know a lot of people are too, and can be really confused about some of the nuanced things that are really specific to departments of corrections, and even so departments of corrections in specific states, counties, and cities, depending on if someone's in jail or versus prison versus a detention center, which they haven't really covered detention centers for immigrants. They usually focus on people in federal or state prison, mostly state prisons. And so talking about the different nuances and being able to unwrap those while also commenting on just the entertaining aspects of this show overall is and so I've never done show reviews before, recorded, but I'm happy to do them. And I also want to show you guys my shirt, okay? This is the Big Gretch tee. This is actually my state governor, Gretchen Whitmer. And up in the corner here is a photograph of my state representative, Jewel Jones, who I support. And as a result of the mismanagement of the Michigan State Department of Corrections, let's open some chips, y'all. I'll tell y'all the snack mix when I light the incense. Because of their mismanagement, they mistakenly imprisoned a state rep. And what other reason than him being young and black? And he was not only unjustly incarcerated and arrested, he was also brutally beaten and maced. So you guys, I'm really immersed in the issues and the topics around human rights and the legal criminal system. And so yeah, on